Okay, should we make a start?
Yep, sounds good to
Maybe
me.
a few more people will come in the next minute or so. Let's get go, make the most of the time. So yeah, as Kerry said, thanks for joining. My name is Jason Williams, part of the LifeQI team here. Going to be taking you through this getting started training webinar. Before we launch into that, it's obviously not the only webinar that we run. Whilst we run this one normally once a month, there are a number of other ones as well. Each month there'll be an office hours where you can come in and talk to us in more detail if you've got a particular question or query, but we also run some more in-depth webinars on specific topics like the charting or the PDAs and the driver diagrams. So look out for those kind of on the website and in the monthly roundup emails as well. But today it's all about getting started. We're going to start off with the website and just give you the kind of very basic introduction from there before we actually dive into the system. So particularly if you're brand new to LifeQI or you don't have an account yet, perhaps the simplest thing is to head to the website, and from there you can kind of get to the system and the help center and everything else that you might need to do. So for those of you who haven't been there before, it's lifeqisystem.com, and that will take you through to the homepage, which looks like this. So if you're first of all just looking to find out a bit more about what LifeQI is, you've been told that you need to use it, that sort of thing, then you can read through the homepage, features, use cases, some good information in there that tell you more about what the platform is and some of the benefits. If you're looking to sign up or even log in, you can do that from here as well. Down here beneath this big blue button, you've got login and sign up buttons. Click on the relevant one of those and it will take you through to the relevant login page for your particular country, from where you can also click the sort of don't have an account yet option, and it will take you through the sign up process if it's your first time joining the platform, basically. A couple of other things to point out while we're here as well. If we go into the resources drop down, a few things to point out. In terms of some general kind of QI learning material, if you head over onto the blog, there's lots of good material there. Mention the webinars that we do. If you click onto that option, it will take you through to the different webinars that we have coming up, and you can book a slot on those as you have done for this one. Help Center is where all the really detailed step-by-step guides on how to do everything in LifeQI is, and we'll have a look at that in a second. But there's a link to that from there. And then over on the right, it's worth pointing out these different how-to guides. So these aren't specific to LifeQI, but they're all about sort of QI type improvement topics. So if you want to read in a bit more detail about these aspects, you can kind of get to those from there. But I'm going to head over into the Help Center first of all. So URL for that being help.lifeqisystem.com. And as I said, this is where we've got all our really detailed how-to articles on how to do, manage your profile, start and edit projects, work on your measures and charts, that sort of thing. And you can search this, so you don't need to browse through it. You can just search for it if you've got a particular query that you're looking to have answered. But what I'm going to do today is we're mainly going to go through one of our training guides. If I click into this section, there's a few different training guides, and it's the Getting Started for Users guide that we're going to essentially work through in the session today. So you might want to get that up yourselves, or in slower time, you can come back to this and kind of have a look and work your way through it. There is a full training video, which is a slightly shorter version of what we're going to go through today. So you can always come in and watch that. I think that's about 20 minutes in total. That'll take you through a lot of what we're going to cover today. But then beneath that, you've got the more step-by-step type guide. And this is really what we're going to work through today, the kind of topics listed out down here, basically. So now I'm going to move over into LifeQI itself. I'm going to skip over the actual sign-up process. You will be able to do that, as I said, from the website. I'm going to assume that you kind of work your way through that process. It's nice and straightforward. But this is what it's going to look like when you first log into LifeQI. You'll come in and you'll land on your start page. And this is always going to be specific to you. First time you log in, your start page is going to be a little bit more blank than this. In time, it will be populate with everything that you're kind of connected to and working on in LifeQI. So few key things to point out. So projects, this is where any projects that you're a direct team member on, you'll see them here. So if you're just coming in to work on your pressure source project, click straight on that and you'll be into it and start updating it. Any requests or invitations for new projects to be invited to, that sort of thing, you'll see those up here and you can kind of accept and decline those. You can pin people's profiles, you can see your organization's profile, any groups, programs, stuff like that that you're connected to. You'll see all of that from your start page. Further to that, you've got the main menu, which is down the left-hand side. So these are all the different areas that make up LifeQI. We're not going to go through all of those today. We're mainly going to concentrate on really setting up a project and populating a project. So let's click into the projects area and we'll have a look at how that works. This list initially is going to show me all of the projects that I'm a team member on. So again, first time you come here, it may well be blank unless you've already been invited to a project. But as you create them or as you're invited to them, this list is going to begin to be populated over time. You don't just have to look at your projects, though. You can essentially change the filters on the right-hand side and get a view of other work that's taking place, particularly across your organization. So the default view here is things that are active that are mine. But if I click on my organization's projects and unclick on my projects, the list updates quickly there. And it's now showing me everything that's active across my organization. So you can kind of have a view into what your colleagues are working on. You can then click into more filters and further filter that list to particular projects that have maybe started recently or completed recently, things like that. Options like that are available, or you can just use the search bar at the top if you're looking for projects on particular subjects. That's kind of a really handy way to find out what else is going on, basically. We might have a look at a populated project later, but what I was going to do now is move through the process of setting up a project. It's kind of useful, obviously, getting started step. So that's going to happen from this page, top right-hand corner up here. We've got a start a new project button, basically. So that's always where you're going to come to start your new projects. Click on that, and it's going to load up a wizard, the sort of project setup wizard, and there's a few steps that will guide us through to create our new project. I'm going to skip over that step because you won't actually see that first step. It's just because I've got access to a few workflows. So what we're going to do now is work through this kind of what will be a 5-step process for yourselves, where you kind of work through essentially chartering your project. So there's a kind of few key bits of information that it's going to ask you to populate. So one of the only mandatory fields here is the title of the project. So you have to give it a title. Other fields like this problem field is grey. We don't have to fill that out. We can come back to that and populate that later if we wish to do so. But I'm going to pop a bit of information in here just so we've got something to work through. So my problem statement, click through to next. It's just then moving us through to that next step. I'm going to pop in a brief aim statement. So let me type it in there. These little kind of information buttons on the right hand side here, if you're not really sure what you're meant to write in one of these boxes, so rationale, or kind of what do we mean by that, if you click on the information button, it will give you exactly that, a bit more information on what you should be writing, some hints and tips on how to fill out that particular field. Particularly helpful should you need a bit more information on that sense. I think my microphone might just cut out. Hang on a second.
Hi, Jace. Just whilst you're looking at your microphone, a couple of questions have just come in. Karen, thank you for your questions. You mentioned, can you see projects from other trusts? So you get options on the projects themselves, and there is an option for everyone can view, or just team members can view. So if they have put everyone can view, it means that you can actually go into the project area and search for all projects that you may well be interested in. And like I say, if they've given that privacy permission, then yes, you would be able to see that. You back with us, Jace?
Yeah, I think I'm back with you.
Okay. There was just one other
turn off then.
There's just one other question. Can you cut and paste from other forms? I'll leave that one with you.
Yeah, I guess if I understood correctly, you can kind of cut and paste information into these fields as you're working through it. So I didn't type that out sort of letter by letter. I've got a different document open to the right of the screen, and I've just kind of copy and pasted that in. So yeah, if you've got information in a Word document, for example, you can just kind of copy and paste that into here. That's fine. Okay, I'm not going to fill out the rationale now. Skip through that because you can come back to that later. Next step, step 4, who's on your project team? So a few things to talk through here, one of which will kind of relate to the previous question about visibility. But let's start with the members. So I'm starting the project, so I'm automatically on it, and it's automatically linked it to my organization. This is the first opportunity where I can begin to invite others to that project as well. I don't have to now. Sometimes you might want to go a bit further, finish setting up the project, maybe populate, drive a diagram, things like that, and then invite people in later. But I'll show you kind of how to do that now, should that be kind of relevant to do that at this step. Fairly obviously, click the new invite new members button up there. And the first thing you're going to be presented with is this little search bar at the top, where you can search for people. So type in their names and they'll appear in the list. Anyone that you've sort of regularly invite to projects and are connected to will automatically appear up here even before you search for anything. But let's just say I'm going to invite Kerry, search for her. She appears in the list. I kind of get sense check that that's the right Kerry. And if I click on her, it'll give me some options so I can set a role. So say she's going to be the sponsor on the project, and there are a number of kind of standard roles that are available. I then get to decide what level of permission she has over the project. View, edit, and admin, most of which are fairly straightforward. The key thing to note about admin permissions, this is admin on the project. So it's not admin for the whole organization or anything like that. But this admin permissions on a project will allow you to basically control the membership. So who has access to that project? So if you are a project admin, you can add and remove people from the project, basically. Whereas if that's not relevant, I only need Kerry to sort of be able to add data, things like that, then edit permissions is perfectly valid in this case. So set those, and there are those little information buttons to provide a bit more information if you can't quite remember what an admin user is. I'm happy with that. I'm going to click add. And there she's now showing us ready to invite. So when I finish, you'll get an email notification saying, Jason's invited you to his new project, basically. See, there's a question come in about, can you invite colleagues who are not registered with LifeQI yet? Yes, you can. If I click back on invite new members and scroll a bit further down, at the bottom of this list, there's an option here for can't find someone. If I click on that, again, this extra little window come up, invite someone new to LifeQI. So as long as I've got their email address and I can punch that in here, I can then send an invite. You don't have to, if you don't have access to your subscription and the licenses, you won't need to fill that out. But if you've got their email address, pop that in there and click send invite, and they will then appear in the list, much like Kerry does here, but it will have their email address and it will say ready to invite. Again, when I then finish this sort of setup process, it will fire them off an email, but in that email, it will say, Kerry, Jason's invited you to LifeQI, please come and click here, sign up to the platform, and then once they've done that, they will then be given access to the project, basically. So that can be a really good way of introducing new people to LifeQI, rather than just go and sign up to the platform. You start a project that you know they're going to be involved in and invite them directly into that project. That's a good way of doing it.
Sorry, just whilst we're on this one as well, can you add roles relevant to your trust, or are they set?
Annoyingly, it depends. So there are a number of default roles that are available, a reasonably long list of default roles that are available, but some organizations are able to add custom roles or kind of additional roles, and that depends whether you've got this kind of workflows add-on enabled for your organization, whether you've got professional licenses or the standard licenses. So we'd have to kind of maybe take that one offline and understand which organization you're working for as to whether that would be possible or not. But technically possible, but not for every organization, depending on your setup.
One final question. Sure. Are they able to view the project info without a subscription license?
No. So in order to be able to get into LifeQI and view any project, you do need to have a user account and a licensed user account. So it's, every individual who needs access needs their own user account. I guess sort of on that note, on a kind of a security, if you like, note, the privacy setting here. So the default setting is only members can view. So if you're not a direct or indirect member of this list, you won't be able to see the contents of this project. And what I mean by direct and indirect is, obviously, Kerry and I are direct members. We are named people on this project. An indirect member would be a user who is connected to Bay Health General Hospital. So any other staff at our organization can see the contents of this project. They wouldn't be able to edit it, but they would be able to see it because it's one of our organization's projects. If I were to change that to everyone can view, that means everyone in life who has a LifeQI account in your country can view the contents of your project. Not edit it, but they would be able to view the contents of the project. And so that's not the default setting, but if you've got a project that you do wish to share widely, you can do so. Typically, people either don't do that or they don't do that at the beginning. Maybe once you've finished a project and you want to use it as a bit of a showcase, you're quite happy to share it more widely across the community. At that point, you can come back and change this setting and make that more widely available, but obviously do so in accordance with your organization's sort of information governance policies, basically. Okay, let's work through the next couple of steps. So 2 more steps to go. Categorize your project. A couple of options here. Again, not mandatory, but if you wish to do so, you can do it now. So linking to priorities. So in many cases, organizations will have either improvement priorities or kind of broader kind of quality priorities that they want their projects to be associated to. If you click link priority, if your organization does have any, then they're going to appear in a list like this. So these are the ones that we have available for our organization. If I want to select one to do with, say, staff wellbeing, so just click on it, click back to this menu, and I can see that that one is now linked. You can add multiple, so I can go back into that menu and click again, should I wish to do so. And then tags works in a very similar way. Tags are useful for other people finding the project, but they're also maybe used to help drive a lot of the reporting that the organization does. So if I click into add a tag, it works in a similar way. I can search for them. I can select some of the commonly used ones, or I can click can't find a tag, and that will give me the option to add, create new tags for my project. Let's just say I'm going to click Joy at Work for this particular one, click back onto that. So I'm going to see that tag and that priority are now linked to this project. And then final step, when and where is the project taking place? So start and end dates, it's going to default to today and 1 month forward. Obviously come in and sort of select those dates. Again, you can change those at a later date should that need to happen. And then you can type in the location of the project as well, but not mandatory. So that's then that final step, and then click Create Project. Second, just to save that, but that will be that sort of setup or chartering process then complete, and it will unlock the rest of the project space for me, as we'll see in just a second. Okay, so that's now kind of saved that project. It's now officially kind of registered on the system, and it's taken me through to the general page. We'll explore the other pages in a second, but this one of our project guides has sort of popped up, so it's trying to encourage me to do the next logical thing in the process. So if I'm ready to do that, it's going to kind of ask me to go in and start creating my driver diagram. Once I've done that, this guide would disappear, and then another little one will pop up here, sort of encouraging me to start building out my measures. So I'm going to just close out of that for the moment, and we'll work our way around the rest of the project. So yeah, just to orient you a little bit before we dive in. So these extra pages have now appeared, so I can now work my way through driver diagram, measures, PDAs, discussion threads, those sorts of things. But all the information I've already set up now appears on this general page. So if I scroll a bit further down, these details, you see all the information we've already added. If I wish to make any changes, either add the rationale or maybe correct the aim statement, we'll just click the edit button. These fields will all become changeable, and I can then make those relevant changes and then click save, and it will save all of those changes for me, obviously. This panel up here is, of course, the glance panel. So it's just going to preview the content or how sort of mature this project is, basically. So you can see I've got a team, but I don't have any of these aspects set up. The other important factor we've got over here is this score. So this is a project progress score, and it appears on all of the projects in the system, and it's just a really useful way of recording the progress of the project as it works through the kind of the project life cycle. So we haven't made this score up. This is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, or IHI. It's their project progress score, but we've built it into the system, and it's a really good way of tracking project progress, particularly if you're looking across, a dozen or 100 odd projects. To be able to see their scores and see when they last changed is really helpful. So there are a number of standard titles and definitions here, and as the team or you're working through your project, you can just kind of come in here and update the score. So now that we've charted it and we've got a bit of a team, I'm going to move this up to a 1, click change score, and it's going to save that now. So that's kind of really helpful key reporting metric for most organizations using that. Okay, so that's the score, and I would certainly encourage you to come back to that and regularly update that, particularly as you work through some of these other stages, as you're charting your data, as you're populating your PDAs, and you're seeing progress, come back and make sure that score accurately reflects what's going on. Let's move into the next few pages now. So the first up is the driver diagram, and the idea here is we've built a driver diagram tool into the platform. So you don't have to kind of build your driver diagram in PowerPoint or something like that and upload it or email it somewhere. You'll come in here and you'll use the driver diagram tool to build that out. So obviously there's not much on there yet, but if I click this edit button up here, this tool is going to kind of open up and I can begin to build it. It's already got my aim statement that I added when I first set up the project, but I can now begin to click the pluses and kind of build out these drivers basically. I'm not going to build a particularly detailed one, but I just put a couple of things in here. So get, primary driver 1, click another plus down here and I can add primary 2, maybe primary 3. And as you can see, it's taking care of kind of the drawing and the layout and it's spacing everything out. If I then want to add secondary driver like that, further to that, obviously a change idea, so I can add those in there. So just very quick and easy to begin to build one of these diagrams out. Yeah, so it's sort of as straightforward as that, really. You can see we've got this choose a color option. So if I come down to the bottom here, I can click manage colors, and this just allows me to color code the driver diagram. If I want to add, either to just change the colors so they're not black and white, or I want to color code it in some way to provide an extra sort of dimension to the diagram, I can do that if I select some colors over here, and then I can add labels to those, so you can call them whatever I want, probably something more insightful than the names of the colors, but by doing that, that's going to appear at the bottom here, and then I can then come back up and actually color code these different drivers. So people sometimes might do things like RAG rating them, or they might do them by kind of types of drivers, or you might just want each of your sort of horizontal sections to have its own color just to help with the sort of legibility of it. It's kind of totally up to you. You don't have to use them, but it is a useful extra kind of dimension. And once you're happy with that, not a very good driver diagram, but let's just say we're going to leave it there for the moment. If you click save, it's now going to kind of log that onto my project. Maybe I was happy with that and I want to go and share that with the team. I can come into actions up here and I can export the driver diagram. So I've got an option there in actions that was export driver diagram, and that will take an image of the driver diagram and download that onto my computer. So I can now go include that in a report or email that out to people perhaps asking for some inspiration on my rather lackluster driver diagram. So that's kind of useful to understand that that's up there. I think last feature to point out here is the history. So there isn't much of a history to this driver diagram yet. Typically over time, they're going to make lots of different changes and iterations to this diagram. And as they build up over time, I can click on that history button and it will show me exactly that kind of history. Who last changed the driver diagram? When did they change it? What did it look like before they changed it? You can kind of see that audit log will build up in there. That can be particularly helpful. So that's a quick look at that. Let's jump now onto the measures and charts. Obviously, we're going to build out these different measures and start to add in our charts. Nothing there to begin with, but the action here will be come in and add a new measure. So the different sorts of measures and charts we're going to be able to create here are either run charts or control charts. And there are, I think, 7 types of control chart that you can create, and we're going to have a look at those in a minute. Again, there's a little wizard, a bit like when we started creating a project, there's a little wizard that's going to guide you through with a few mandatory fields. So I've got to give my measure a title, and I've got to select the type. If I click into this drop-down list, it's going to appear for me. It's going to select outcome. If you're not quite sure what those different types are, click that little information icon and it will give you information, description on each of those types. Space for my operational definition, which I'm going to skip over for today. Similarly, the data collection plan and information on what you should be putting in that. Here we get to the different chart types. So it defaults to a run chart, and a lot of people will use that. But if you're looking for one of the control charts, if you click into that, you can see here's the full list of different control charts that you can select from. If you're not sure what those chart types are, but you think maybe you need to use them, there's an extra guide here called Need Help Choosing a Chart Type. If you click on that, it'll pop up this extra little window, and you can see we've got these different chart types listed along the top, and kind of allows me to sort of basically browse through them and see for each of the chart types a description of what a P-chart is in this case, typical examples of when I might use it, and the kind of data I would need to be capturing if I was going to use a P-chart. So say that is going to fit with the data that I have. Next step here, frequency. So maybe I don't know what the data collection frequency is going to be, or it's going to be an irregular frequency. But if I do happen to know I'm going to be collecting data regularly, then it is helpful to pick that. And then the system kind of help auto-populate the x-axis for you. And if you're going to want to aggregate data from different locations, you're going to need to pick kind of a fixed frequency as well. So let's say for the example of this, we're going to add in monthly data. Click through the next, and then the last step, should it be relevant, is I can link this measure back to one of my drivers. So I'm kind of making that linkage between driver diagram and measure. Don't have to, but if I do want to, click the link, and then I get the option to kind of pick from primary drivers or second drivers. So let's say we're going to link this to P2, click the plus, and it's made that linkage there. I can go back and link it to others as well if I wish to, but for the sake of today, just going to link it to P2. Create that measure, and that's now going to save that. That's kind of the first step, really. That's about defining the measure. The next step is going to be about creating the chart and adding the data. Reason it's a two-step process is you can create multiple charts against a single measure. The main scenario there being if you're collecting data from multiple locations, maybe different sites, different wards on the hospital, that sort of thing. You can have a chart for each of those locations, but keep it all under one measure, and then even aggregate that data as well. The planning information that I captured is in this plan section here, so I can come back and change some of that, but not all of that. Some of it is set. Things like the chart type is now set. If I go into the chart section, this is where we can begin to add a chart, and they will then start to appear here. So I've got our add a chart top right here. Because you can add multiple charts against the same measure, I get to give it a name. So I'm just going to say maybe this data is coming from Abbey Ward, so I'm going to call it that. So it makes it nice and clear if I do have multiple, which chart is which. Then I kind of got the beginnings of my data sheet here. So these are my column headings, basically. If I click add row, it's going to give me my first row. Now I've got a couple of choices in terms of getting the data in. I can either just click into the cells and start typing the numbers and the dates in, particularly if I've only got one or two data points. That's nice and easy to do. And then click create chart, or I can copy and paste data in. This is particularly useful if you've already got lots of baseline data. You basically just want to whack it in here, kind of dump it in here. You can do that. In order to do that,
Jace,
yep.
Sorry, just on that one, there was a question quite early on about copying and pasting data, and I did say that you would just show a quick example, which I know you're probably just about to do, but I thought it might be helpful. Somebody asked about moving that data from an Excel spreadsheet into the system.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. Let's have a go at that now. So I've got, it works exactly the same from Excel, but in a Google Sheet, I've got some data set up. So let's say I'm going to come in and copy this. Key thing here, so my LifeQI data sheet is expecting 3 columns of data because it's a P chart, and they're going to be ordered, time, count, and total. So I do need to make sure that my spreadsheet is formatted in the same way. But assuming that it is, I'll just come in here and select that data. I'm going to copy that. Go back to find the right tab, go back into LifeQI, and I'm just going to click into this first cell, click into the date cell. I'm not going to select a date, but I'm going to basically click paste, click that in, and give it a second. It should paste in all of the columns and all of the rows of data that I've copied from my spreadsheet, basically. So you can see it's got all my historical data in there. All of those rows for me. Scroll down and click create chart. So that's definitely the quickest way of getting a load of data in if you've already got that historical data, basically. So save that, and I can now go back in and create another chart if I've maybe got data from somewhere else, or if I click on this row here, it will open up that chart for me. If I want to come in and add some more data, what we'll see is the data sheet now sits beneath the chart. So this is going to be the place where I can come back in and update that data, either correct any data that's already there or add more data to that. If I want to make any changes to that data sheet or to the chart itself, I'm going to need to click this edit button up here. So it's nice and safe. You kind of can't accidentally do anything to the chart until you click the edit button. Once you do so, though, the chart and the sheet become editable. So this is where I can now delete. I can change numbers in here. If I go to the bottom, I could add another row or copy and paste in more data. There's then a series of options become available within the chart itself. So if I now click on a data point, I get a couple of options. So here I can add notes against the data point. So add my note. I could link in PDSA cycles. So I haven't got any on my project yet, but if I did, I'd better click into them, that list there, and it would show me the different PDSA cycles I have available and kind of make that linkage. I also get, depending on where you are on the chart, I get a few extra options down here. So this is saying next phase. So the chart has started in its baseline phase. If this is the data point that I want to sort of transition from baseline into test, then I would click next phase. It's giving me a little warning here because I've done that quite early in the chart. I don't have that many data points. So it's saying, you know, it's maybe not best practice, but if I want to carry on and do that, just click OK, basically. And what that's then done is this baseline period at the top here, there's now a marker here, and it now shows the test phase there, basically. So it's kind of going to fix that baseline for this period, and it will start to project it forward once I've clicked save and kind of saved that change that I've made to the chart, basically. So if I already do that, highlight at the top here, these kind of pink boxes that have appeared, this is where it's looking for any special cause variation in the data. So it's spotted some high variation and it's spotted an outlier because it sits outside of that upper control limit. If I'm not sure what these things are, if I click on them, it will give me the definition of those. So it's telling us how we calculate high variation, how we calculate an outlier, that sort of thing. So depending on the chart type that you've got, a run chart or control chart, and your data, obviously, it will display different types of special cause variation for you. Not going to go into too much more detail on the charts there. There are a variety of other options around, recalculating control limits and things like that. We normally run a separate webinar session that will dive into that more detail. And we did one of those last month. I think we've got another one coming up soon. So always tune in for that if you want to go into a bit more detail. But what I will say whilst we're here is this actions button, as we saw earlier, is useful if you want to export any of that information. So if you want to export the chart as an image, use that option, or if you want to get the data out into an Excel file, use that export datasheet option, and that'll allow you to get that out as well. So just come back out of there. So that was a quick look at one of our measures. Let's say we want to go back up to our measure list, back up to the rest of the project, and I'll see I've got this measure in here. I can come back in and start to add other measures to my project should I wish to do so. But we're going to skip forward for now and go into the PDSAs, a few more things to cover off for the end of the session. So following the same sort of format, this is going to list out PDSAs in this case. Don't have any yet, but if I click new PDSA ramp button, it's going to guide me through a short wizard to go about setting up the first PDSA ramp and the first PDSA cycle. Again, very minimal in terms of mandatory fields, but give your PDSA a title, something more helpful than that, and then work through kind of the few wizard sort of steps here. So what's the aim of this PDSA? Do you want to link it to any of your change ideas, that sort of thing? Who's going to be involved in running this PDSA cycle? Can I assign this one to Kerry? When's it happening? Where is it happening? That sort of thing. Space for your notes, create some additional tasks if you want. If you want to manage this one in quite a bit more detail, you can kind of come in and add individual tasks in there. You make your prediction, link it to any of your measures, should that be relevant. If you can, a bit like we did with the driver diagram and the measures, if you want to link a PDSA to any of your measures, you can make that linkage explicit here, and then click create PDSA cycle. Skipped over quite a lot of those fields, so maybe you don't know all of that information up front, but you can come back now that I'm in it, come back and edit that and begin to fill out that in a bit more detail. Because I've kind of done or captured the initial plan anyway, if I scroll down, I've now got a few extra fields that have appeared, which are the do, study, act fields, basically. So again, click edit, a bit like we have elsewhere, and then these free text fields become available, and I can begin to populate those. Once I've worked through that cycle, click new cycle, and it will create the next PDSA cycle in this particular ramp for you. So nothing particularly sophisticated there. It's all about just how do we make it nice and simple and straightforward? How do we provide one place to come to capture all of your PDSAs? It's always the same template you're working through. Everyone will be able to find it because it's always in the same place within the project. Basically, it's just keeping it nice and simple and capturing the information that's required.
Sorry, Jace, just a really quick question just about charts. Can charts be formatted?
I guess depends what you mean by that. If we can get any more information on what you mean by formatted. So there are things you can do, like changing the control limits, recalculating control limits, adding notes, linking in PDSA cycles.
So changing the axes, range, colors, etc.
Okay. Not at the moment, no. The kind of the colors are sort of fixed, and the axes, the range on the axes will be determined by the data that you've got. So obviously the x-axis is as long as how much, you know, the number of dates you've got in there, and the y-axis, it will auto calculate that based on the range of data that you've got. We have worked on a bunch of charting updates that will be released later this year, and that will introduce those kind of formatting options. So you will be able to pick and choose colors and pick and choose axes ranges, but that's not available yet, I'm afraid.
And one more about the ramp. What do you mean by a ramp?
So I guess a ramp is a collection of related PDSA cycles. So it's often you've got this idea, you want to test it out with a PDSA cycle. If that didn't quite work, but you just want to iterate that on idea, it's not like you're throwing away the whole idea. You kind of want to try a slightly different version. That would typically be part of the same ramp. But if you've got another PDSA cycle that's a totally different idea, that would generally form the beginnings of another ramp. So I think I've got another project open. Let's have a look. Jump into the PDSA section here. So we've got, so in this, the way we display it, so each of these rows is basically a ramp, and the idea is we're separating them out. We haven't just got a long list of PDSAs that are all kind of mixed up. We've got a few different versions here, 3 cycles where we've had a go at basically introducing new beds and different versions of that to help with pressure sores. But down here, we've got a totally different idea, which is about getting people out of bed more often, not about introducing new beds. So we've set that up as a whole separate PDSA ramp. And then there are a few different tests of change that we've got going on in there, basically. So it's just a way of grouping related PDSA cycles. Okay, that was kind of a bit of a look at the PDSAs. Shout if there's any more questions on that, Kerry. I guess whilst we're here, I'll touch on the last tab we've got, last page we've got in the project, the discussions area. So the idea is, as well as the sort of the core kind of improvement tools in those other pages we've been through, there's also a space where you can have discussion thread type functionality. The idea being Life UI is not just about kind of the data side of the project, but it should be the space where that team can come together and work on their project, whether that's discussing the project, adding data into charts, planning PDSAs, whatever it may be. This is kind of the space for that, which is why we've built in that discussion thread functionality, and you can see different people posting messages, see when they posted. You can attach files to those posts. You can see who's involved in that thread, that sort of thing. So you kind of have a lot of that discussion, debate, and kind of keep the narrative around the project all bundled in the same place, basically. Helpful for the team, you know, when they are working on their project, this is the space to come, and they can add their data and then join in the discussion. It's also really helpful to use that discussion thread functionality so that when people look back on this project in 6 or 12 months' time, you've got that kind of narrative that went with the project to understand kind of what happened and why it happened, basically. And then related to that, in terms of sort of telling the story, if we jump over to the right-hand side here, there's a few different options. This one that looks like bullet points is the timeline. So if I click into that, it gives me a timeline of different events on the project. Most of this is automatically created. So things like when people add a measure or change the progress score, you can see who did that, when they did it, and kind of what that change was. So we can see the score went to a 4.5, or a day ago, someone added a measure called SOF demo, that sort of thing. So a lot of that's automatically created. So you can come here and have a look to see what's been happening or what's not been happening on the project. But you can also add to this timeline. You can leave status updates, which would appear a bit like here. So we had a team huddle 3 months ago. You kind of see that. So you can kind of got that record of what's been happening and people posting to that timeline as well. Other things we've got here, so the filing cabinet, fairly self-explanatory, but you can upload files against your project and even organize them into folders. So if there's other bits of information that you need to capture alongside that project, keep them in there, particularly if you've got maybe other tools that you need to use and need to upload the output of those. They can appear here. Any reports that you run against this project will appear in here as well, kind of automatically be saved into that file area. So that's really helpful. You can see all the pretty faces up here. We added a couple of people to our new project earlier. As you add people, they're going to appear in this members area. So this is where I can come in and add new members, just like we did when we first set up the project. But I can also come in and say remove people should I need to do so, or change their roles and change their permissions by clicking on their names, basically. Okay, last but not least, I think I mentioned kind of reporting on the project. A few times we've clicked on the actions button and we've kind of exported something. So in a similar way, it's how we would do reporting. So if I click on actions at the top level of the project, I get a reports option. If I click on that, I will get a list of different report templates. The list will be specific to your organization. So there are some kind of default LifeQI reports, but many of which you have available will be kind of determined by your organization because they'll have different styles and formats of reporting. You basically click on the report template that's most relevant to the report you want to run, and it will then extract the information from your project and put it into a report, which you can access both on LifeQI, and you can export that as a PDF or potentially as an Excel file, depending on the format of the report. But yeah, kind of a separate session to dive into the details around reporting, but to simply run a kind of a project report, yeah, actions reports, select the report type you want, and it will then run that report for you. Once it's saved, as I said, it will appear in your documents area. It would also appear in your reporting area in the main menu as well, basically.
I've got a quick question. Where are the impacts, benefits, and outcomes?
Sure. I guess there aren't fields that are specific to those sort of three things. So a couple of different ways in which people might capture that. So you've got kind of the charting side of things and that, which capturing to an extent, if you like, the impact of that. Often what people do if they want to write a bit more about those subjects, those impact subjects, is they may be a report template that they would run that would capture that. So at the relevant point in the project, you could go to actions reports, and you might have a report template that is, you know, our benefits impact kind of assessment or whatever it might be called. Those aren't specific fields in the platform, just because those are the sorts of things that organizations will do quite differently. So they tend to be created as report templates, and you would come in and click on that, and it would then both extract the information that's required for that report template, and it would give you almost like text input areas. So you would have the opportunity to write the benefit statement around what this project has delivered, that sort of thing. So yeah, that would kind of be built into the reporting side of things.
And is that sort of an end of project report? So that's what's coming through at the moment. Could that be classed as an end of project report? Can you do it in that way with regards to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it doesn't have to be at the end of the project. So you might have different report templates that you are expected to run at different stages of the project. So there could be certain reports you are meant to run maybe partway through, or sort of 3/4 of the way through if you are seeing some improvement. There might be a implementation planning report type thing that you might want to begin to run. So you can begin to fill out information on how we're going to make sure we embed the results of this project when we do finish it. So that might be partway through, but there could be another one that's the project closeout report, which is going to ask questions like, what have the benefits been? What's the impact assessment of this going forward? So yeah, it'd be about having different report templates for different points in the project lifecycle and encouraging people to run the relevant report at the relevant time. Okay,
Sorry,
any other?
Just one more quick one. So if I have to show my executives the project achieved its aims, where would that be? So for example, if there's any financial benefits or other outcomes potentially.
Sure. I guess most typically it's going to be in the measures section. There would normally always be at least one outcome measure that's directly tied to that aim statement. So I can't remember what our aim statement is on this one, but it's something to do with the proportion of patients suffering from pressure sores. If I can go in and open up that chart and then show them that we have, I don't know, this chart's going to show that we've actually increased the proportion of people suffering from pressure sores, but let's say we were trying to increase that proportion, then it'd be a case of using this chart as the quantifiable data that says, look, this is how we have managed to shift, hopefully in the right direction, the proportion of patients that are suffering from pressure sores. So in terms of providing hard evidence, it would normally be the charts, and it would often be the outcome measure that would provide the data required for that. And then the report that we're talking about is often then the kind of the write-up that goes with that, but it's typically going to be the chart that provides that kind of the hard data in that sense.
Just on that as well, if you don't mind me kind of coming into that, it's really important just on that note when you are evaluating the impact of your quality improvement work, that your IHO project progress score is kept up to date, because that is a true reflection of the work that you are running on the ground. So really making sure that that score is a true reflection of the work underneath it. So where are you on that IHO project progress score scale? because that is the first thing that a lot of people are going to see, that your organisation is going to see, your executives are going to see when they come in. So making sure that that score is a reflection of the PDSAs and the measures that you are running is going to be really, really important for you at the organisations or the collaboratives that you are running.
Yeah, absolutely, Erica. And it's often there's a different area, an analytics area in the platform, and it's often that area that you say some of the leadership are looking at some of those dashboards, and it will be the project progress scores that's highlight to them, okay, we've got a group of projects here that have delivered improvement. They'll click through to those. That's when it will then take them down to the project level where they can then see that charting. So it's often that progress score that alerts the organization to things that have achieved or are kind of hitting that level of improvement. And then it's the charts that backs that up and provides that evidence to demonstrate what you've done. Okay, I think that was pretty much everything we were going to cover today. I hope that's been helpful. I think we've used up our time today. So yeah, this recording I think will be sent out to people, I believe, Kerry. I think that'll probably come out in about a day or so's time. So you'll have access to watch that back. But as I said, you've got the kind of the help center, so you can kind of look into that. And there's that getting started training guide with the full video in there, which is worth looking at in a bit more detail as well. Should that be relevant? Cool. Okay. If we haven't got any more questions, should we leave it there?
Thanks, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you on the next one. And also feel free to drop into any of our office hours. They are open for an hour for people to drop in and ask any questions that they may have. So do use those if you have any direct questions for us. But thanks again, everyone, and speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.